السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. لعل النزعة الانفصالية في أوروبا ليست بجديدة بيد أنها نالت زخما أوسع اليوم، ولكن كيف سيكون حال وشكل أوروبا بالمحصلة على خطوط قومية أو إقليمية؟ مع النائبة الإيرلندية المستقلة كلير ديلي نتحدث عن هذه النزعة الانفصالية وأسبابها وتداعياتها من الداخل. معكم زينب صفار، تابعونا. لعل أوروبا باتت مسرحاً للانفصاليين ولحركات الاستقلال كتلك التي في كاتالونيا في إسبانيا، واسكتلندا في المملكة المتحدة، ولومباردي وفينيتو في إيطاليا، وفلاندرز وسواها. لكن يبدو أن هذه الحركات اكتسبت زخماً أكبر في الآونة الأخيرة، إذ في الربع الثاني من هذا العام أعلنت الوزيرة الأولى في اسكتلندا نيكولا ستيرجن زعيمة الحزب الوطني الاسكتلندي عن نيتها تنظيم استفتاء جديد على استقلال اسكتلندا عن المملكة المتحدة. وحدث تأثير الدومينو مع كاتالونيا ولومباردي وفينيتو في النصف الثاني من هذا العام. وفي حين أن دوافع الانفصال يمكن أن تتفاوت، فإنها غالبا ما تتغلغل إلى الرغبة في الحصول على مزيد من سيطرة تلك المناطق الطامحة للانفصال على مواردها المالية ومصادر الإيرادات. وقد ترغب تلك المناطق في توسيع نطاق قوات الشرطة المحلية أو وحدات مكافحة الإرهاب، كما ينظر إليها على أنها وسيلة لحماية الهويات الثقافية الفريدة أو اللغات واللهجات الإقليمية من إغراقها بحسب المراقبين. ولكن كيف سيكون شكل أوروبا إذا ما نجحت كل حركة انفصالية في مطالبها وأهدافها؟ وفقا لهذا السيناريو لن يسلم من التقسيم سوى عدد قليل من الدول، بينما يتشرذم الباقي في كيانين أو أكثر على أساس الحدود اللغوية أو الإقليمية. كلير ديلي عضو البرلمان الإيرلندي عن حزب مستقلون لأجل التغيير، كيف تقرأ هذه النزعة للانفصال والاستقلال في بعض المناطق الأوروبية؟ ولماذا باتت تكتسب زخما مؤخرا؟ وما هي تحديات خروج بريطانيا من الاتحاد الأوروبي؟ وما يعني ذلك لإيرلندا؟
Yeah, I think the situation is different in different countries, although there would be obviously similarities. We cannot say they are all the same, but they are probably all the same from the point of view that the existing political and economic order in all of those societies, and indeed across Europe and many parts of the world, is not meeting the needs of ordinary people. And this is one way, I suppose, of people expressing their dissatisfaction with the existing order of things. So
what do you mean by the needs of their own people?
Well, I suppose across Europe people may have the idea that everybody in Europe has a good standard of living, is happy, but in actual fact what we've seen over the last number of years has been very serious economic austerity policies, a rowing back of conditions years ago which people thought they had forever, maybe the idea of a permanent job, a pension when you retire, a house, a roof over your head, a right to education, a right to healthcare. In many countries those things have gone now. They have been privatised or put out of the price of ordinary people. So many people are suffering as a result of that and are looking for an alternative way of organising their society. They are not happy with things the way they would be. And I suppose the independence referenda or movements are an expression of that. They are an attempt by people to find a different way of organising their societies because they've been let down. In some cases there would be historic mistreatment also and historic repression, or as well. So that is beginning to break down.
But the
again.
Scottish referendum failed, for example, and also the SNP has lost like 1/3 of their seats in the parliament. So the prospect of calling for a new referendum, for example, has gone with the wind. Perhaps now, okay, and also. In the wake of the events, the repercussions of the Catalonia also independence, you've seen all this attacks that took place. So do you think that these two scenarios would just quell the people from asking for more referendum or separation?
I think it makes it difficult. I mean, the origin of the movement in Scotland, there have always been Scottish nationalists, but maybe they did not get the view of the mainstream. They were not that popular. The reason why it became popular was the failure of the British Labour Party, and the party that traditionally represented working people and ordinary people and had an enormous base throughout Scotland. They were the minority party, a majority party in Scotland, but they lost their socialist roots. They lost their ability to challenge imperialism and so on. So they became very
narrowly represented.
Yeah, they just existed, supported the existing social order, and people said, you are now not representing us. And across England then you had into that gap, because the Labour Party were nothing different. They came to power and they introduced the same policies against their own people. So people tried to look for something different, and in Scotland that was around the SNP, but they couldn't deliver. I mean, the campaign in Scotland inspired a lot of people to hope for a better future, but it was actually won or lost on the basis of fear. The fear of them being isolated economically, because it's very hard for small economies to survive. So you have the contradiction. On the one hand, people aspiring to a better future, a hope that their dreams and aspirations will be recognised, but then the fear of being economically too small. I think issues like Catalonia are more complex. I mean, obviously in Lombardia and Veneto, the people there were not looking for independence. They want more regional
autonomy.
Regional autonomy. I think the problem in Catalonia was the appalling reaction of the Spanish government. Actually fueled the police, yes. If they had allowed the referendum take place, I think maybe it would have been lost. But now the situation has developed a momentum of its own, and it is complicated because, while obviously respecting anybody's right to independence totally, at the same time there are many people who would want to stay with Spain also. And I think the Spanish government and the state have created a big mess now, and it will be very hard to see where that will end up. But I think that will maybe frighten some other areas to push back. All of it is symptomatic that the European powers are out of touch with their people. Yeah.
Right. Claire, there have always been separatist and independence and secessionist movements in Europe, but they seem to have gained momentum lately. Why?
I think that is because of the austerity policies that were implemented across the European Union, which have had a very serious consequence on the living standards of people in many states. And I think people have, out of that hopeless situation, they don't see any different way. So they look to say, okay, maybe we can do things better. Maybe the problem is in Rome, or maybe the problem is in London, or maybe the problem is in Madrid. If we were able to control our own destiny, we would do it better. And I think that's reflective of people's frustration, that they are removed from those in power. But it's because of the economic repression that took place over the last number of years. Is it only the economic
issue, or regional, for example, powers and the language, for example?
You see, I think when the economy is going forward and things are going well, maybe divisions that are there and differences that are there can be patched up. They can be covered up. They are less important, because if I'm happy, I have a job, I'm out doing things, my children are fine, I don't really care. But when I can't answer those basic issues, then I have no alternative but to look for a different way.
You don't have the means for survival.
Exactly. And then you must look at different, and then people look back at their history and they see how Europe was broken down differently before. But I mean, we had a European Union which was sold to the people of Europe as being a social Europe, something to bring the people of Europe together. And people like that. Everybody wants to be friendly. I like people of all different nationalities, but I don't like the European Union because it's not a union of the people. It was a union for big business, a union for militarism, and it took a lot of the power away from the people. So we are driving towards now an EU army linked in with NATO, and all of the big companies and big business powers have won from the European Union, but not the people. And these secessionist movements are a concept, because people are looking back now to their own history and say, you know, when we didn't have this European Union, when we were on our own, we looked after things better than this. And I think it's coming from that.
And now, Claire, how would Europe look like if every secessionist movement should, succeed in whatever they are asking for?
I think
is it going to be very fragmented?
It would be very difficult, and I think it would be very difficult for those governments to deliver also for their people. I mean, they seem to me to be, rather than fully worked out movements, to be movements of frustration without a fully worked out plan. I mean, you take Scotland, for example. Have they got the economic means to survive on their own? Yes, if they're feeding into the European Union economy, but the idea of having, lots of little independent states around Europe would be very difficult to see how that might work. But I also believe that the European Union in its present form will not remain. I mean, the idea of people leaving the European Union and being very disappointed in that is something that is very much in the minds of the people, even though they dream of a social Europe, but they don't like the reality. And I think the economic pressures will make that difficult.
Right, Claire, allow us to stop now for a short break, and then afterwards we're going to talk a bit more about the Brexit, Ireland and the challenges. إذا فاصل قصير ونعود، لا تذهبوا بعيدا.
خروج بريطانيا من الاتحاد الأوروبي يعد التهديد الأكبر للرفاه الاقتصادي والسياسي الإيرلندي. أما على الساحة العالمية اليوم فقد يختلف مدى الضرر بشكل كبير اعتمادا على النموذج الذي تعتمده بريطانيا نهائيا لخروجها من الاتحاد الأوروبي. النائبة الإيرلندية المستقلة كلير ديلي، كيف تقارب خروج بريطانيا من الاتحاد الأوروبي وما يعني ذلك لإيرلندا؟
Well, I suppose we've had an enormous amount to talk about it, but the reality is it's speculation as to what it will actually mean, because we don't really know. It has not happened yet. I mean, there are some very practical reasons or problems that we need to address. Obviously, Ireland is a small island, but Northern Ireland is part of the UK. So now part of Ireland is going to be split again, and the question is, will there be borders as there were before? It's not so long ago that we dismantled those borders, and now the idea of them being back again is a very, very serious matter of concern for a lot of people. Obviously, we do a huge amount of economic trade with the UK. They are our biggest partners, but also our link with the European Union is more important also. So how they strike that balance, it's very difficult to say, and really all we've had now is talk. The European Union say, oh yes, Ireland's situation is a priority for us, but we don't really believe.
What about the common area travel and the single market and the customs union? I mean,
it's hugely complex, and it's really hard to know how they are going to untangle it. They talk about I mean, it's a big loss to people in Britain, the idea that they lose that as well. And I mean, it's arguable that if there was another vote there now, would the vote be the same? That is a question that I think maybe it would not be the same, because it's become very, very messy. But the idea of, yes, I mean, travelling, the customs borders, if we are back to it will cost the Irish economy a huge amount. I mean, there will be many industries where they operate collectively as an all-island economy. So you take industries like the horse racing industry and so on. Horses are generally organised on an island basis. So if the island is cut into two different economies with different borders, it will be very, very difficult. It will cost companies in Ireland a lot of money.
Not just the goods. I mean, the
Yeah.
people, even the people
Yeah.
and the goods. How would the movement, become between Ireland, the UK,
Yeah.
and the EU, and also within Ireland as an island itself?
Well, you see, they would be saying that obviously we would be on the. We are the European Union and we are the border of the European Union, and then the north is there as well. It's cut off, so it's like having a piece of your body sort of hanging there cut off. I mean, how would it work? It would be very, very difficult. I mean, we're looking at, we've had it before. We've had border before the European Union. We had borders around the north. So if they were to go back to that, that would be very difficult. So they need to have an arrangement where people have a free move. How will they do it? I have no idea. I have no idea how they will do it. Like the European Union needs to put the pressure on for that to be what they call a soft border, where there will be not too many difficulties of people travelling, but at the same time, that will be. How do you square that circle? It's not too easy.
It's very difficult.
To me,
it's
the only way, I think they will have to
people.
have borders again.
Especially like a country like Ireland, you just remove the borders and now they are getting them installed again between the people of the same country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ironic like that when the borders were there before, and we were used to, and it's not that long ago, a couple of the people were driving through checkpoints with soldiers and walking around and being, worried about maybe bombs or whatever. The removal of that border and the free movement and the ability has been transforming for people in Northern Ireland, because they were very enclosed, but it has freed the society an awful lot. So a lot more shopping, a lot more, it lifts the weight of, being living in a cut-off war area was very difficult. So once all that was gone, it was a big help. The idea of borders going back, even without a war, is just psychologically, that is a big thing. And even for people in the north as well, it is a very, very big problem. And we really don't know where it will end up. And I mean, I think from the point of view of the UK, it reflects that British people were really fed up with what went on in their own leaders had let them down, and they vote for this arrangement, which is not really a way out for them either,
So allow us to move now, shift gears and move from this turbulence when it comes to economy and, the secessionist movements and whatever is taking place in your part of the world to our part of the world where we are now here together in Malula in Syria. First of all, I would like to know your perspective. This is your first time here, I believe, Claire. How do you feel being here in this country, in this war-torn country for the last 7 years? And we will talk later on about the reconstruction efforts.
Yeah, I suppose personally I would feel very humbled to be here. We have watched the war from afar for many years, watched the suffering, tried to make sense of it, tried to stop where we can. We're a very small country in the middle of Europe, but we actually have, our weight is far greater than our size in international spheres. People like Irish people because we were neutral in Europe, and we felt we could play a really important role in the European Union of saying, don't be interfering in a way in which is prolonging the situation. We should be there to help, to assist, dialogue and all, but not to interfere. And the West interfered to prolong the war, and that we would, but to have known that, to have spoken about that in the Parliament, to have tried to search US planes to see were they carrying anything to try and stop it, to actually be here and it will be an incredible experience for us. I mean, you could say, what did you expect? What does anybody expect? I figured that, yeah, maybe, I mean, the people are beautiful, the country is beautiful. In that sense, I would have expected that, because anywhere I've travelled, my experience is that ordinary people are the same. It's the people in power who generally mess things up. Ordinary people just want to be friendly, they want to look after their children, they want a decent, peaceful life.
Claire, where are the other Claire Dailies and Mick Wallaces that would come all the way to this country to those war-torn countries to see with their own eyes, you know, just to know the real truth behind what's going on around?
Well, we have a view that part of the problem in some ways is political parties and viewpoints, so we are independent. So sometimes when people are in political parties, their allegiance is to the party, and sometimes the party can come separate to the people, and the interests of the party is more important than the interests of the people. So our colleagues in Ireland, many of them, they stand for election. They don't care what goes on, even outside their own, in Ireland, not to mind in Europe, not to mind in the Middle East. So they just want their own area so they can come back into power themselves. And we see for many people, if you want to go in and be a politician, or you want to go into government or into the parliament to try and change things, but they spend so much time trying to get in. When they get in, they just want to stay, and they do nothing. They just keep themselves there. That's certainly our experience. So they lose interest, or a lot of the time you would have trips organised, which would be done as what we call junkets. They go to be wined and dined by important people. They think they themselves are important, and they don't get an idea of what is really going on.
But don't you believe that you are going to be demonized when you go back home because of this trip?
No, I couldn't care less. We don't mind that we are demonised all the time from the mainstream media, but actually we are very popular with the people, and it is a trend across Europe now. That the mainstream media, as less and less people are believing what they say, newspaper figures are falling. Most people know they tell lies. Like in Britain, they tell awful things about Jeremy Corbyn. He's very popular. In Ireland, they say terrible things about us, but actually we're pretty popular as well. And we don't care about the media. It doesn't matter. You have to be true to yourself first. And we would say if people don't like that and they don't want to vote for us, that's fine. I can sleep at night. So we don't mind going back. But I don't think we will be given out, because not only have we have agitated for Ireland to take more refugees. We did manage to get, but we always, when we say that, but stop interfering in their countries, which is the reason why they are becoming refugees.
In this sense, Claire, the United States, Britain and other countries, and this is my last question for you, ma'am, opposed to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, will not support the reconstruction of the country until there is a political transition away from Assad. This is what the British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson said recently. Do you think that this is don't you think that this is the decision of the Syrian people?
Of course I do, and that is political. I mean, we wouldn't have a huge amount of time for Boris Johnson, and a lot of people in the UK probably wouldn't either. This is precisely the type of political interference which is not helpful. It is not up to me to say who should rule the Syrian people. That is a matter for the Syrian people. I think there has probably been a little bit of obviously one of the key reasons why the war happened in the first place is interference from the West in trying to have regime change here. That didn't work. So they need to now accept that and to sit down and allow the people of Syria decide how to solve their problems. It will not be easy. You know, there are obviously, you know, the Kurdish areas, the whole Kurdish issue needs to be, but it is not up to anybody outside to say that Assad has to go as a precondition or anything like that. Absolutely not.
Right. Independence for Change, TD Claire Daly, member of the Irish Parliament. Many thanks indeed for joining us from Malula.
Thank you.
Always welcome, ma'am. إذا لقاء جديد في الأسبوع المقبل مع ضيف جديد وقضية جديدة ودائما من الداخل. للمزيد من التواصل بريدنا theinside@الميادين.net وصفحتنا على الفيسبوك من الداخل من كل فريق العمل بمعلولة في سوريا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.